Right, so whilst you were busy recovering from the weekend and trying to remember what day it is, Sir Keir Starmer has just performed his third major policy U-turn in the first 19 days of 2026. 3 reversals in 19 days. That is not governance, that is a political hokey-cokey. 1 step forward, 2 steps back, shake it all about and hope nobody notices you have absolutely no idea what you are doing. The latest humiliation involves the Hillsborough Law, a piece of legislation specifically designed to prevent institutional cover-ups following tragedies, which the government has now somehow managed to turn into its own institutional cover-up by trying to sneak in exemptions for intelligence agencies, getting caught, and then frantically backtracking when bereaved families and MPs quite rightly lost their minds. And now Nick Timothy, the newly appointed Shadow Justice Secretary, has delivered the political equivalent of a finishing move, declaring that Keir Starmer is too weak to lead his MPs, even on our national security. Absolutely brutal. Quick favour, if you are absolutely loving this political chaos, hit that subscribe button and smash the notifications bell. Over 94% of you have not yet. It is completely free, takes 2 seconds, and keeps us bringing you the inside scoop on Westminster's continuous shambles. Cheers if you did. Right, back to Labour's latest disaster. So, let us establish exactly what has happened here, because the timeline and the details matter enormously. The Prime Minister pulled the Hillsborough Law legislation from the parliamentary schedule entirely after a fierce backlash from bereaved families and backbench MPs over proposed exemptions for intelligence agencies. Pulled it entirely, not amended it, not tweaked it, just yanked the whole thing off the agenda, like a student frantically withdrawing an essay when they realize they have plagiarized half of it. That is not the behavior of a government in control. That is the behavior of a government in full-blown panic mode. The Public Office Accountability Bill, which is the formal name for the Hillsborough Law, was designed to prevent institutional cover-ups following tragedies, such as the 1989 Hillsborough disaster, where 97 Liverpool football fans died, and the authorities spent decades lying, obstructing, and blaming the victims rather than admitting their catastrophic failures. The families of those victims have campaigned for more than 3 decades for a law that would force public institutions to be honest, transparent, and accountable when things go wrong, and they finally got a government to commit to that law. Except, in classic Westminster fashion, the government could not resist mucking it up. Ministers proposed amendments that would bring security services within the scope of the legislation, which sounds good, right? Transparency for everyone, including MI5, MI6 and GCHQ. But then you read the fine print and you discover that the proposed changes would have required disclosure to be approved by the heads of MI5, MI6 and GCHQ. Let that sink in. The people running the security services would get to decide what information about the security services could be disclosed. It's like letting a restaurant inspect its own kitchen, or allowing a student to mark their own exam, or asking a politician to investigate themselves and expecting an honest answer. It defeats the entire purpose of independent accountability. Campaigners immediately warned that this could allow intelligence agencies to conceal serious failures behind claims of national security, and they are absolutely right, because that is exactly what would happen. Anytime there was a cock-up, anytime someone died because of institutional negligence or incompetence, the heads of the agencies could simply say, "Sorry, disclosing this information would jeopardize national security," and that would be the end of it. The Hillsborough Law would exist on paper, but would be completely toothless in practice, at least when it came to the security services. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham and Liverpool City Region Mayor Steve Rotherham, both of whom have been deeply involved in the Hillsborough campaign for years, issued a joint statement warning the amendment risks undermining the spirit of the legislation and creates too broad an opt-out for the security services. Undermining the spirit of the legislation is political speak for you have completely gutted the thing we have been fighting for and replaced it with meaningless bureaucracy. And they are right. The entire point of the Hillsborough Law is that institutions should not be able to hide behind excuses when people die. But the government's amendment would have created exactly the loophole that would allow hiding behind excuses. Liverpool West Derby MP Ian Byrne, who was actually present at the 1989 Hillsborough disaster, a survivor with deeply personal knowledge of what institutional cover-ups do to families, indicated he could not support the bill with the government's amendments included. And he was not alone. As many as 30 Labour MPs backed his alternative proposal, which tells you everything you need to know about how badly the government misjudged it. When you've got 30 of your own MPs ready to rebel, when you've got survivors and bereaved families publicly condemning your proposal, when you've got mayors of major cities issuing joint statements against your legislation, you've cocked it up spectacularly. One source, close to negotiations, described the unfolding chaos as absolutely mental, which is the kind of quote that normally gets sanitized in official statements, but occasionally escapes into the wild and perfectly captures the reality. Absolutely mental. That is not how legislation is supposed to work. You're supposed to consult with stakeholders, draft sensible proposals, build consensus, and then present a bill that people can support. You're not supposed to blindside everyone with a terrible amendment, provoke a rebellion, panic, and then yank the whole thing from the schedule, whilst desperately trying to figure out what to do next. Nick Timothy, the newly appointed Shadow Justice Secretary, absolutely savaged the government over this mess. He said the government is asking MPs to approve the Hillsborough Law with a clause about its application to MI5, which it says it will replace in the Lords with who knows what. Keir Starmer is too weak to lead his MPs, even on our national security. Too weak to lead, that is the accusation that will sting the most, because Starmer's entire brand is supposed to be competent, serious, grown-up leadership. He's not supposed to be chaotic. He's not supposed to be making it up as he goes along. He's not supposed to be too weak to control his own parliamentary party. But that's exactly what is happening. The dramatic music, the action movie editing, the whole vibe of it screams, trying too hard. It feels like when your dad tries to use youth slang and somehow makes everything infinitely more awkward. How do you do, fellow border security enthusiasts? It is the governmental equivalent of that. And here is the truly delicious irony in all of this. The government launched this TikTok account presumably to control the narrative around migration and border security. They wanted to show strength, competence, results. Instead, they have handed their critics an absolute gift. They have created a focal point for every joke, every criticism, every ounce of skepticism about their migration policies. The comment section of that lone video has become a digital town square where the British public is exercising its God-given right to take the absolute piss out of authority figures who have made themselves look silly. The question we must ask is, what were they thinking? Did nobody in the entire chain of approval for this project raise their hand and say, hang on, might this come across as a bit daft? Was there no moment of reflection where someone thought perhaps a social media account is not the solution to a complex humanitarian and political crisis? The fact that this made it through multiple levels of government bureaucracy and political oversight without anyone pumping the brakes is genuinely fascinating from a decision-making perspective. You also have to spare a thought for the poor social media manager who has been assigned to run this account. Imagine that job description. Wanted, social media expert to make illegal immigration enforcement engaging and shareable. Must be comfortable with constant mockery and single-digit engagement rates. Thick skin essential. Apply within. That person is currently living through what can only be described as a professional nightmare. They are the face of one of the most ridiculed government initiatives in recent memory, and they have to keep posting through it all with a stiff upper lip. What makes this entire situation even more absurd is the timing. We are in January 2026. TikTok is hardly new or cutting edge anymore. If the government had launched this 5 years ago, it might have seemed innovative, ahead of the curve. But now it just looks like everyone finally caught up to what young people were doing in 2019 and decided to copy it without understanding why it worked in the first place. It is the policy equivalent of your mum finally getting Snapchat just as everyone has moved on to the next thing. The broader context here matters too. This is not happening in a vacuum. The UK has been grappling with migration issues for years. The small boats crisis has dominated headlines. Different governments have tried different approaches, from the Rwanda scheme to increased channel patrols to international agreements. Some of these approaches have been more successful than others. Some have been controversial. Some have been legally challenged. But what they all had in common was that they were actual policy interventions, not marketing exercises. That is ultimately what makes this TikTok account so frustrating for people across the political spectrum. It feels like style over substance. It feels like the government is more concerned about appearing to do something than actually doing something effective. And when you combine that perception with the fact that the execution has been so spectacularly poor that even the attempt to appear effective has failed, you end up with this perfect storm of ridicule.